morning sun spilled softly through the curtains of Amara's apartment, painting the room in pale gold. The city outside was alive. Cars honking, children laughing, vendors calling out on the street below. Yet inside everything was still. Amara sat at her small wooden table, sipping lukewarm tea as she marked her students' notebooks with calm precision. Every movement was measured, every sound deliberate, as if silence had become her shield. 2 years had passed since her younger sister Chica died in that terrible accident. People said time healed all wounds, but for Amara, it had only taught her how to hide them. She no longer cried, no longer spoke about it. She just worked, taught her classes, came home, and repeated the same routine day after day. A rhythm that kept her from falling apart. Her apartment was neat, almost too neat. Books lined the shelves in perfect order. Family photos tucked neatly away in a drawer instead of hanging on the walls. Even the small picture of her and Chica as children, once framed on her bedside table, now lay face down, gathering dust. Amara preferred it that way. It was easier to keep ghosts buried when you didn't look at their faces. Kalechi, her fiancé, often told her she worked too hard. "You need rest, Amara," he would say with that gentle concern in his eyes. But rest was dangerous. Rest meant silence, and silence meant remembering. So she kept herself busy, teaching until dusk, cooking meals she barely tasted, and grading papers until her eyes grew heavy. Still, no matter how much she tried to silence her mind, something always found its way through. Sometimes, when she switched off the lights at night, they flickered back on for a second, a faint flash, like a heartbeat refusing to die. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she dreamed of water, dark and endless, with whispers that came from beneath its surface, and once or twice she could swear she felt someone standing behind her just out of sight, breathing softly in the dark. She would tell herself it was nothing, just her imagination, just tiredness. But deep down, she knew tiredness didn't whisper your name. At school, her students adored her, Miss Amara, the calm and patient teacher who smiled even when the world seemed heavy. They didn't see the way her eyes dimmed when someone mentioned siblings, or how her hands trembled slightly when she held old photos for classroom projects. They couldn't know the secret weight she carried, the memory of the last words she ever said to Chica. It had been an argument, a sharp, ugly one. Chica had begged her to come along to the village, to visit their mother, to reconnect with family traditions. But Amara had refused. "You and Mama can pray to ancestors all you want," she had said coldly. "I have work, Chica. I don't live in the past." Those were the last words she spoke to her sister before the accident. Since then, guilt had lived quietly in her chest, like a shadow that never left. She could laugh, even smile at times, but behind every joy was an ache she could never name aloud. That evening, she returned home after another long day, the air heavy with the promise of rain. She placed her bag on the table, straightened the books, turned on the lamp. Everything just as she always did. Routine was her comfort, her safety. But that night, as thunder rolled far away and the city lights blinked outside, something felt different. The silence in her apartment wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt expectant, watching, waiting. She tried to ignore it, poured herself tea, and sat back down to her papers. The clock ticked gently, steady and sure. She reminded herself she was fine. She was safe. Still, as she reached to turn another page, the light flickered again. Once, twice, before settling into a faint, trembling glow, and for a brief, fleeting moment, Amara thought she heard something move behind her. Just a whisper. The soft rustle of air. The faint hum of a voice she hadn't heard in years. She froze. Then silence returned. Mara shook her head, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Just the wind, but somewhere deep inside, a small, buried part of her knew, the wind didn't whisper your name like that. And in that quiet apartment, beneath the flickering light, the calm before the storm began. The storm began just after midnight. Rain fell hard against the windows, beating like frantic hands trying to be let in. The wind howled through the narrow streets of the city, shaking loose shutters and making the trees bow and twist. Inside her small apartment, Amara sat hunched over her desk, red pen in hand, a cup of cold tea by her elbow. She was grading papers again, the same mindless work she always turned to when her thoughts grew heavy. The thunder outside made her jump each time it cracked, echoing like the sky was tearing apart. Still, she kept going, refusing to let the unease sink in. The room flickered as the lights struggled against the storm. A low hum filled the air. Amara sighed, rubbing her temples. "Not tonight," she whispered to herself. "Please, not tonight." She looked up. The shadows along the walls seemed thicker than usual, stretched and restless. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Then another. The sound of rain filled every corner of the room, a curtain of water that drowned out the world. Then, a knock. Soft, slow, deliberate. She froze, the pen slipping from her fingers and rolling across the desk. The sound came again. Knock! 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 Each one heavier, more deliberate, as if someone stood on the other side of the door waiting, unhurried, certain she would answer. Amara's heart raced. Who could it be at this hour? The clock showed 12:47 a.m. She hesitated, her breath caught in her throat. The air felt colder now, like the storm had found its way inside. "Who's there?" she called softly. No answer, only the whispering rain. She rose slowly, each step toward the door echoing louder than the thunder outside. Her bare feet touched the cold tile floor, sending a shiver up her spine. Another knock, closer this time, heavier. She felt it in her chest. When she finally reached the door, she hesitated again, hand trembling over the handle. "It's just the wind," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. She took a deep breath and pulled it open. And there, standing in the doorway, drenched in rain and shadows, was Chica, her younger sister, the one she buried 2 years ago. Amara's breath left her body all at once. The storm went silent in her ears. Chica's face was pale, her eyes distant, but there was no anger there, only sorrow. Her soaked dress clung to her skin, and water dripped from her hair onto the floor. She stood perfectly still, looking at Amara with that same soft expression she used to have when she wanted to be forgiven. For a long, trembling moment, neither moved. Amara's lips parted, but no words came. Her vision blurred. She took one step forward, and then blinked. Chica was gone. The doorway stood empty. The rain fell harder, wind howling once more. Amara staggered back, clutching her chest, her breath sharp and broken. She looked down and saw wet footprints leading into the apartment. They stopped near her desk and vanished. The pen she had dropped earlier lay in a small puddle of water. Her teacup trembled slightly on the table, though the air was still. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." She ran to the door and looked out into the hallway. It was empty, dark and still. No one there, not a sound except for rain. She locked the door and pressed her back against it, sliding to the floor. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced between reason and fear. It wasn't real, she told herself. "I'm tired. I'm overworked. It was just a dream." But even as she said the words, her eyes darted back to the faint wet marks on the tile. They were real, too real. That night, Amara barely slept. Every creak, every drop of rain sounded like footsteps. Every flash of lightning made her eyes snap open. She could still see Chica's face, pale, wet, sorrowful. staring at her through the dark. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight spilled through the curtains as if nothing had happened. Amara stood barefoot by the door, staring at the now dry floor, searching for any trace of the footprints. Nothing remained. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "I'm losing it," she whispered. "That's all this is. Grief, guilt, and no sleep." But that calm didn't last. 3 days later, she came home from school to find an envelope slipped under her door. No address, no name, just her first name written in a familiar, slanted handwriting she hadn't seen since Chica's death. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was an old photo. 2 little girls by the river, smiling, their arms around each other. On the back, written faintly in blue ink, were 5 words. "You promised to come back." Amara's heart stopped. The paper slipped from her hand and floated to the floor. Outside, the wind picked up again, gentle but steady, and in the corner of the room the light flickered once, as if someone unseen had entered quietly and was waiting. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Amara tried to act as though nothing had happened, yet every part of her life began to shift, quietly, then painfully. She taught her classes, smiled at her students, answered Kalechi's calls. But behind every word and every movement, her mind whispered the same question. What did I see that night? Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her. At home, things began to change. Small things, at first. Her mirror would fog over without reason, as though someone had breathed upon it. When she wiped it clean, a faint outline of a handprint would appear. Small, delicate and wet. Her sister's favorite perfume, the soft scent of hibiscus and rain, would fill the room for a few moments, then vanish just as quickly. Once, when she turned on her radio, it crackled to life, playing a song she hadn't heard in years. Chica's favorite, the one she used to hum while braiding Amara's hair. Each time it happened, Amara's heart clenched tighter. At night, the whispers began. Faint at first, so soft she could almost pretend it was the wind. But soon they grew clearer, a familiar voice threading through the dark. Amara. It was gentle, almost pleading. Amara would sit up in bed, her eyes wide and wild, searching the shadows. "Chica?" she'd whisper, though her voice trembled. But no answer came, only the silence that follows when the dead are listening. By the 3rd night, she couldn't take it anymore. The exhaustion, the fear, the guilt, it all pressed against her chest, like a weight she couldn't breathe beneath. She decided to visit her mother. Mama Neka's home sat on the edge of town, surrounded by tall palms and red earth that glowed in the afternoon sun. The moment Amara stepped through the gate, she felt something different, calmer, older, alive. Inside, the air smelled of burning incense and old prayers. Charms hung from the walls, and a small altar stood in the corner, candles flickering beside carved wooden figures. Her mother looked up from her chair, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You've been seeing things," she said, before Amara could speak. Amara's throat tightened. "Mama, I think I'm just tired. I've been under stress, that's all." But Mama Naneka shook her head slowly. "No, she's reaching out." Amara's eyes filled with disbelief and fear. "Mama, please, don't start this again. Spirits, ancestors, omens. It's just superstition." "Chica is gone." Her mother leaned forward, voice low. "When the dead return, Amara, it is not always to haunt. Sometimes it's to save. You know your sister's spirit won't rest until something is made right." Amara felt a wave of frustration and sorrow crash inside her. "Made right? I can't fix the past, Mama. I can't!" The words echoed in the small room. Silence followed, thick and painful. Mama Neka said nothing more. She simply reached out and placed a hand over Amara's, her eyes soft but steady. That night, Amara drove home in silence, the road wet with recent rain. Her mother's words replayed over and over in her mind. Not to haunt, to save. But save from what? When Amara got home, the apartment felt colder than usual. She went to the bathroom and splashed water on her face, staring into her reflection, pale, tired, haunted. Then the mirror fogged over again. Her breath caught. Slowly, letters began to appear across the glass, drawn by an invisible hand. "Why didn't you come?" Amara stumbled back, her heart hammering. The message stayed for only a few seconds before fading, leaving behind only her own frightened reflection. She wanted to scream, to run, but something inside her kept her still. She stared into that empty space, the ghost of her sister's question echoing louder in her heart than in her ears. She sank to the floor, covering her face with her hands, and memories she had buried for years began to surface. She was back in that last night with Chica, her sister's voice, warm, hopeful, persistent. "Come with me, Amara. Just a few days in the village. Mama says we should visit the old shrine, honor Papa's memory." But Amara had waved her off, busy packing her papers for school. "Chica, please. I don't have time for those things. You and Mama can do your rituals. I believe in work, not spirits." Chica had frowned, hurt flashing in her eyes. "You've changed, Amara. You've forgotten who we are." Amara had turned away. "And you refuse to move forward." The silence between them had been sharp enough to cut. The next morning, Chica left alone. She never came back. Now, years later, Amara's tears burned as they fell. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the emptiness. "I should have gone with you." But there was no reply, only the faint sound of running water. She froze. The sound was coming from her bedroom. Cautiously, she stood and followed it. The air felt heavy, damp. When she reached her room, she saw it. Her old photo frame of Chica lying on the floor. The glass cracked, water dripping from its edges, though the room was dry. Her heart pounded. She picked up the frame, and as she did, a strange calm filled the room, a stillness so deep it hurt. She looked toward the window. Through the glass, the world outside shimmered for a moment, and she saw her sister again, standing by a river, silent, reaching out. Then she was gone. Amara gasped, clutching the frame to her chest. She didn't know if it was a vision, a dream, or madness, but one thing was certain now. Her sister was calling her somewhere, and Amara, trembling yet determined, whispered to the empty room, "I'll find you, Chica. I'll find you." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance once more. The haunting had only just begun. The next morning, Amara woke to a heavy silence. The city's usual sounds, the distant rumble of buses, the chatter from the street below, felt muffled, as if the world itself were holding its breath. She sat up slowly, her mind still fogged with the vision of Chica standing by the river. It hadn't been a dream. She knew that deep down. Her sister was trying to tell her something. For the first time in years, Amara felt a pull toward the village she had tried so hard to forget, the place where Chica had died, the place she had never visited since the funeral. She packed a small bag. Only the essentials, a few clothes, her phone, her car keys, and the photo frame that had cracked the night before. She wrapped it carefully in a cloth and placed it at the top of her bag, close to her heart. As she locked her apartment door, she hesitated for just a moment. A whisper floated faintly behind her. Soft, fleeting, almost like a sigh. "Go." She turned quickly, but the hallway was empty. The road to the village was long and winding, stretching through fields and forests that seemed untouched by time. The further she drove, the more the city's noise faded away, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of birds. But the journey felt heavier than she remembered. Every mile carried the weight of guilt and memory. By late afternoon, she reached the outskirts of her home village, Abocha. The red earth roads, the thatched roofs, the scent of rain on soil. Everything looked the same, yet somehow older, quieter. Children paused their play to watch her car pass. A few elders nodded respectfully, murmuring her name. Amara, the teacher. She forced a polite smile, but inside her chest, her heart thudded unevenly. When she reached her mother's compound, Mama Neneka was already waiting outside, as though she had known Amara would come. Her eyes, ancient and wise, searched her daughter's face. "You've seen her again, haven't you?" she asked softly. Amara hesitated, then nodded. "By the river." Mama Neka's expression darkened. "Then it's time." Inside, the house smelled of palm oil and burning herbs. The evening sun cast long, trembling shadows on the walls. Mama Neka began gathering items from a wooden chest. A white cloth, a calabash bowl, a bundle of dried leaves, and a small, carved idol that looked worn from years of prayer. "What is all this?" Amara asked, uneasy. Her mother's hands didn't stop moving. When Chica died, her spirit was restless. The river gods were not appeased. "You remember the day she drowned?" Amara's throat tightened. "They said she slipped. It was an accident." Mama Neka turned sharply. "Nothing in this life is only accident, Amara. There are debts between the living and the dead. Your sister's spirit has been calling for years, but you refused to listen." Amara looked away, her voice trembling. "Because I didn't want to believe it. I thought belief made me weak." Her mother sighed deeply. "Belief doesn't make us weak. It connects us to what came before." She handed Amara the white cloth. "Tonight, we go to the river." The sun had vanished behind the trees when they arrived. The river glowed faintly in the moonlight, its surface silver and still. It was beautiful. But there was something heavy in the air, like the river remembered pain. Crickets sang from the reeds, and the wind whispered through the grass. Mama Neneka knelt at the water's edge, spreading the white cloth on the ground. She placed the calabash bowl upon it, filled it with water from the river, and began to murmur words in their ancestral tongue. Low, rhythmic, ancient, Amara watched silently, every breath tight in her chest. Then Mama looked up at her. "Call her." Amara blinked. "What?" "Your sister," Mama said firmly. "Call her by name." Amara hesitated. The night air felt cold against her skin, the darkness pressing close. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Chica!" Nothing happened, only the sound of the river moving. "Again," Mama said, louder this time. "Chica!" The wind shifted. The water rippled. A faint mist began to rise from the riverbank. Amara's breath caught. Shapes seemed to move within the fog, vague outlines, like memories trying to take form. "Amara." The voice came soft, broken, echoing across the water. Amara stumbled backward. "Mama, do you hear that?" Mama's eyes never left the river. "Yes, she's here." The mist thickened, swirling into a pale figure. Slender. Familiar. Chica. Her face glowed faintly, eyes sorrowful, her hand reaching out just as in the vision. Amara fell to her knees. "Chica! Oh God! I'm sorry." But the spirit only looked at her, lips trembling. "You left me," she whispered, voice carried on the wind. "You turned away when I needed you." Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks. "I was scared. I didn't understand." The spirit stepped closer, the river rippling beneath her feet. "There is danger, Amara. The river remembers. The debt must be paid." "Debt?" Amara whispered. "What debt?" Before Chica could answer, a sudden wind tore through the trees, scattering the candles and throwing the calabash into the water. The spirit flickered, then vanished. Amara screamed her sister's name, but only the river answered, loud and furious. Mama Neka pulled her to her feet. "Enough! The spirits are restless tonight. We must leave." They stumbled back toward the path, the storm growing behind them. The air seemed alive, angry, electric. Just before they reached the car, Amara turned back. Across the water, she saw it. The faint glimmer of Chica's figure once more, standing by the riverbank, pointing toward something deep in the forest. A silent message. A warning. Amara wiped her tears, determination replacing her fear. Whatever Chica wanted her to find, she would, because this was no longer about the past. Something darker was buried in that river, and her sister's spirit would not rest until Amara uncovered the truth. Sleep eluded Amara that night. Even after returning to her mother's house, the river's roar echoed in her mind, a sound too alive, too accusing to be forgotten. She lay awake on the narrow bed she had once shared with her sister as children. The walls around her whispered with the weight of memories. Laughter, secrets, songs they used to sing under mosquito nets. Now, only silence remained. At dawn, Amara rose, her face pale but resolute. The cracked photo frame of Chica still rested on her nightstand, a faint shimmer glinting across the glass, as if touched by dew, though the room was dry. She stared at it, then whispered, "I'll find out what happened to you, I promise." The village was stirring when she stepped outside. Smoke curled from cooking fires, roosters cried, and children ran barefoot through the red dirt lanes. Yet, beneath the morning calm, there was an unease she hadn't noticed before. The way people lowered their voices when she passed, the glances they exchanged, she decided to visit the only person who might know more. Elder Okoro, the oldest man in Iboka, and the guardian of the river shrine. His home sat near the edge of the forest, half hidden by overgrown vines. When Amara arrived, the old man was sitting on a low stool, carving a small wooden idol. His hands trembled with age, but his eyes were sharp, watching her before she even spoke. "Amara Neka's daughter," he rasped. "You've returned." "I came to ask about my sister," Amara said, steadying her voice. "About Chica and the river." Elder Okoro's knife paused mid-cut. He sighed. "Some wounds never close, child. The river keeps what it takes." "Please," Amara said softly. "I need to know the truth. Why can't her spirit rest?" He set the carving down, his eyes clouding with memory. "Your sister was chosen," Amara frowned. "Chosen? For what?" "For the Ogwuta, the river's offering," the elder whispered. "Every generation, one soul must renew the bond to keep the village safe from the water's anger. Your mother knows this. Our ancestors made the pact long ago." Amara stepped back, her chest tightening. "You're saying my sister was sacrificed?" The old man didn't answer. He only looked away, his silence heavier than words. Amara's hands shook. No, she drowned by accident." "The police said—" "The police?" Elder Okoro gave a bitter laugh. "They see only what the living allow them to see. But spirits see everything." He leaned closer, his breath faint and raspy. "When Chica refused to give herself to the river, others forced her. The gods took her body, but not her peace. That is why she calls for you now." Amara's world tilted. "Who?" she whispered. "Who forced her?" But the elder looked toward the forest, eyes dark with fear. "Some secrets, child, are guarded by blood." Before she could press further, a gust of wind tore through the trees, scattering leaves around them. Elder Okoro's candle went out. He froze, then looked at her gravely. "Leave before nightfall. The river has remembered you too." Amara turned and fled, her heart pounding. She drove straight to the river again, her thoughts a storm. The road shimmered under the sun, but her hands were ice-cold. When she arrived, the river looked deceptively calm, as if mocking her pain. She knelt at the bank, the red soil damp beneath her knees. "Chica!" she cried out. "If they hurt you, show me, please!" For a long moment, nothing moved, only the whisper of wind across the water. Then, slowly, The surface began to ripple. Images formed beneath the current, distorted but real. A group of villagers at the riverbank, torches flickering. Chica, standing in white, crying out. Two men holding her arms, and among them, a face Amara recognized. Her blood ran cold. Mama Neka. No, Amara gasped, shaking her head. No, that can't be true. But the vision only deepened. Chica struggling, calling her sister's name before she was pushed into the water. The surface closed over her head, the torches dimming one by one. The river went still again. Amara screamed, a raw, broken sound that tore through the silence. She stumbled backward, collapsing onto the muddy shore, clutching her chest as the truth shattered her. Her own mother had offered Chica to save the village. The sky darkened suddenly, clouds gathering fast. The air thickened with the smell of rain and earth. The river began to churn, waves slapping violently against the shore. Amara rose to her feet, her tears mixing with the drizzle. Why, Mama? Why her? The wind answered first, then, faintly, her sister's voice, echoing from somewhere deep within the storm. She did it for you. Amara froze. For me? The voice grew clearer, sorrowful yet calm. The river wanted you, Amara. But Mama begged for another way. She gave them me instead. Amara covered her mouth, the sound of her sobs drowned by thunder. No, Chica. The river roared louder, its waves glowing faintly with blue light. In the midst of the chaos, Chica's spirit appeared once more. Serene, radiant, standing just above the water. You must end it, she said softly. Break the bond. Free us both. Amara reached out, her hand trembling. Tell me how. Return what was taken, the spirit whispered. The charm, the idol from the shrine, burn it in the river's heart. The storm began to fade, and with it, Chica's form dissolved like mist. Amara sank to her knees, drenched and trembling, her heart split between horror and purpose. She finally understood. Her sister's death wasn't an accident. It was a sacrifice made in love and desperation. And now, it was her turn to finish what Chica had begun. As the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, Amara rose slowly from the riverbank. Her clothes were soaked, her eyes hollow but fierce. She turned toward the forest, where the old shrine stood hidden among the trees. Her path was clear. To free her sister and her family, she would have to destroy the very curse that bound their blood to the river. The night was heavy with silence as Amara stood before the river shrine. The air smelled of smoke, wet leaves, and old secrets. The forest around her pulsed faintly with the rhythm of cicadas and wind, but the shrine itself was still, waiting. She held the small wooden idol Elder Okoro had carved years ago, its once bright surface now darkened by age and sorrow. This was the charm that bound her family to the river, the same charm her mother had offered to spare her life. A soft voice called from behind, Amara. Mama Neka stood there, her wrapper soaked with dew, her eyes glistening in the lantern light. She looked smaller now, older, her spirit worn thin. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice trembling. I prayed you wouldn't find out. Amara's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Tears filled Mama Neka's eyes. Because a mother's heart chooses which child to lose. I begged the river to take one, not both. Amara turned away, gripping the idol tighter. You let them kill her. You watched. Mama Neka shook her head. I tried to stop them, but the pact was older than us. I thought her death would save you. And everyone. Her voice broke. But I was wrong. The river never wanted blood. It wanted truth. For a long moment, neither spoke. The forest whispered around them, the leaves shifting like restless spirits. Then Amara stepped forward, her tears silent. Chica doesn't want vengeance, she said softly. She wants peace. And so do I. She walked toward the edge of the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm yet deep, as if listening. Mama Neka followed, whispering a prayer beneath her breath. Her trembling hands reached out to touch her daughter's arm. "Then end it, my child. Let her rest." Amara knelt by the water's edge. The idol felt cold in her hands, heavy with generations of pain. She thought of Chica's laughter, of their fights, of the promises they once made under starlit skies. She remembered her sister's last words in that vision. "Return what was taken." Amara took a deep breath. "Chica," she whispered. "I'm sorry. For the anger, for the silence, for not being there." The wind rose gently, swirling her tears across her cheeks. With one final breath, she lifted the idol and threw it into the heart of the river. The splash echoed like thunder. For a moment, everything went still. Then the water began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter, until the river shimmered like liquid silver. Mama Naneka gasped, clutching her chest as the light spread across the shore. From within the glow, a familiar figure appeared. Chica, her spirit gentle, radiant, and at peace. She smiled at them both. "You listened." Amara fell to her knees, sobbing. Mama Neka reached out, her voice cracking. "My child." Chica looked at her mother with forgiveness in her eyes. "You did what you thought was love, Mama. Now let it rest." The spirit's form began to fade, turning to mist that rose into the air. "Live freely," she whispered to Amara. "The river remembers, but it also forgives." And then she was gone. The light dimmed, leaving only the soft sound of water lapping at the shore. Amara stared into the ripples, her reflection steady and calm. For the first time in years, her chest felt light. She turned to her mother, and for the first time since Chica's death, they embraced, both weeping, both free. Days later, sunlight filled Amara's home in the city. Her nights were no longer haunted by dreams of water or whispers. One morning, as she opened her mail, a small envelope fell to the floor. Inside was a piece of paper, written in Chica's familiar handwriting. "Thank you, Amara. You listened." A tear slid down her cheek, but she smiled, a soft, real smile this time. From that day on, Amara began teaching children not just about math or grammar, but about the stories of the ancestors, stories of courage, sacrifice, and love that lived beyond death. She became what Chica had always wanted her to be, a bridge between the old and the new, between faith and reason, between the living and the remembered. And every evening, she walked to the riverbank near the city park. The water was calm, the sky warm. Sometimes, just for a moment, she thought she saw her sister's reflection beside her, smiling, free at last. The months that followed were gentle, the kind of quiet that comes after a long storm. The air around Amara seemed lighter, as if the weight she carried for years had finally lifted. Even the city felt different. The noise didn't bother her anymore. The shadows in her apartment no longer whispered. It was as if peace had finally found her, or perhaps she had finally found it. She had returned to teaching full-time, her laughter returning slowly, like a song she once forgot. Her students noticed the change. Miss Amara smiled more often now, told stories about her childhood, spoke softly about remembering where you come from. Sometimes, during her lessons, she would pause mid-sentence, feeling something warm brush against her shoulder. The air, maybe, or something unseen. And she'd smile, because she knew Chica was still there, not haunting her anymore, but watching, protecting. When the holidays arrived, Amara decided to visit her village one last time. It was time to say goodbye, not to her sister, but to the place where the pain began. The journey was quiet. The dusty roads glimmered beneath the afternoon sun, the trees swaying lazily in the warm wind. By the time she reached the village, twilight was spilling across the sky, purple and gold, soft and forgiving. The house stood waiting, small and familiar. The same wooden door, the same squeaky hinges, the same silence that once felt so heavy, now gentle and kind. She unpacked her small bag, swept the floor, and lit a candle by the window. Mama Neka had passed the last few months in prayer and rest, her health fragile, but her heart at peace. Together, they had rebuilt something sacred between them, a love cleansed of secrets. But this evening, Amara was alone. It was her final night in the village. Tomorrow, she would return to the city for good. She sat by the open window, sipping tea as the crickets began their song. The candlelight danced softly on the walls. Her mind drifted to Chica's laughter, the river's glow, the way forgiveness had felt like breathing after years underwater. And then, just as the last trace of sunlight disappeared, it happened. A soft knock at the door. Slow, deliberate. 3 beats, the same rhythm that had once frozen her blood on that stormy night. Amara's hand trembled slightly, but she didn't move right away. She just listened. 1, 2, 3. The same knock again. Her heart began to race. Not with fear this time, but something deeper. A quiet recognition. She stood, walked slowly to the door, her bare feet brushing against the cool floor. The night air pressed against the walls, thick with the scent of rain and soil. She reached for the handle and opened the door. No one was there, only the night, and on the doorstep, a single white flower. Amara stared at it for a long moment. The petals shimmered faintly in the moonlight, wet with dew though the sky was dry. She knelt, picked it up gently, and smiled. The kind of smile that carried both tears and gratitude. "Good night, Chica," she whispered. "Thank you." A soft breeze swept through the doorway, lifting the curtain behind her. The candle flame flickered, then steadied, as if acknowledging her words. Amara closed the door, placing the flower on the small wooden altar by her bedside. She didn't pray this time. She didn't have to. Peace had already been said. She lay down, the moonlight spilling across her face. For the first time, she didn't dream of the river or of loss. She dreamt of morning, of laughter, of new beginnings. As the screen fades to black, the narration whispers softly, like a voice carried on the wind. When the dead bring a message, it is not always to frighten the living. Sometimes it is to remind them that love never dies. The camera lingers on the white flower by the window, glowing faintly in the moonlight, a final, gentle sign that some doors never truly close.